Well, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for like our, 12th virtual MnSearch event. Very exciting stuff. So we are board@mnsearch.org. Email us if you have anything on your mind or want to get in touch. And also we're on Twitter @MnSearch. And there's going to be a lot of awesome things that Dana shares tonight. So when you share them out on Twitter, use #MnSearch and we will be sure to give it a like and a share. Huge thank you to our sponsors who help us make these virtual events stay free. Rocket 55 and Blue Key Media, special shout out to you two for being our virtual event sponsors. Also huge shout out to Hook Agency, Click 360, Nordic Click, and Rank Crankers. And if you notice, there's some more space on this page. So if you'd like to be one of the logos up here and help sponsor MnSearch and keep supporting us in our free virtual events, please get in contact with us at sponsorships@mnsearch.org. You can also contact us at board@mnsearch.org, or Jason, if you want to throw your contact info in there. Jason is our sponsorships director and he can get you covered with anything that you need. All the faces you see here, these are our board of directors. MnSearch is a not-for-profit organization. We are entirely volunteer-based and volunteer-run. So yeah, just these are our smiling faces. We're always happy to chat with you, or if you're interested in learning more about how you can help with the board, contact any one of us. Now to talk about membership. So as I mentioned, these virtual events are 100% free, which is awesome. But MnSearch would still love to get your support so we can continue to make things free and just keep making them even better. So there are a few different options to become a member, but contact members@mnsearch.org for any questions that you have. We have a sliding scale option. There's virtual memberships. There's a lot of good stuff going. So feel free to email us, Micah, if you want to put your contact info in there. Micah is our wonderful memberships director, and he can get you set up with anything that you need. Very fun stuff happening next month in the MnSearch community. We have our annual summit, and this is our first ever virtual conference. So as you can see here, we've got our 3 keynotes: Brittany Muller, Ross Simmons, Christy Olson. We've got some awesome talks coming up for you, and it's 100% free. So if you haven't yet, sign up. If someone from the board could just drop in some sign up info, just click on the links, get signed up today. You won't be sorry. So yes, that is Tuesday through Thursday, June 8th through 10th from 11 to 2 Central Time. And we also have, for our local folks, we have a bonus workshop in person. So it is all about Begone, Google, and Facebook, alternative channels for safer footing. And that is Friday, June 11th from 9 to 12 p.m. Central Time. And that is at the St. Paul River Center. If you're local in Ventura Events, that is actually the kind of venue we've been using for the last few years. So if you're at all interested in hearing about this workshop from Aim Clear, we would love to have you. So hope to see you there. And exciting news, lots of exciting stuff happening in the MnSearch world. We've been hard at work this summer, or spring, I should say. So we actually have our new website live. So if you're interested, if someone in the board could help me out, drop a link to our site. It's still the same, mnsearch.org, but it's kind of got a facelift. You can see our brand new summit page on there, and just take a look. Let us know what you think. We're website people, right? So if you see anything, yeah, let us know what you think. All right, and now the reason you're all here. Tonight's event is Dana DiTomaso talking about GA4, and this might be one of my favorite titles of any talk so far. This ain't your parents' Google Analytics. And with that, take it away, Dana.
Thank you very much, and thank you, everyone. I always tell people I got to speak at the MnSearch Summit, I think 2 years ago, and I've been telling everyone ever since that it was one of the best conferences in terms of organization, just pleasant people. So thank you so much for asking me back. All right, I am going to be sharing, hopefully, if someone could give me a virtual thumbs up really quickly to make sure that you can see the presentation. Abby, is it good? I see you. All right, cool. Great. All right. I know it's part of Zoom is like, of course this is working, but you always want to double check, right? Okay, so one of the things is I won't be looking at the chat while I'm talking. It is too distracting, but certainly I will be around for Q&A afterwards. So let's get into it. All right. First off, I want to ask you this question. is analytics part of your job? Which of course is totally a trick question. Of course, analytics is part of your job. And maybe your job title isn't analyst specifically, and looking at the overall results is just a tiny bit of what you do, but it's really important for all marketers, not just us analytics nerds, no matter what your specialty is, to understand how web analytics works and to be able to discuss it with your coworkers, your clients, non-analytics users, your spouse. They love that. I can trust me. All right, so first off, I want to say I'm going to talk about Google Analytics a lot in this presentation. And instead of saying Google Analytics 1,000 times, I'm just going to say GA. So when I say GA, that's what I mean. And I'm going to refer to the current version of Google Analytics as Universal and the new version as GA4, just so we're all on the same page. So before I dive too deeply into the wonders of GA4, I want to back us up a little bit and have a bit of a history lesson on how do we get here. So back in ye olden days, I started in the field in 2000, which is now 21 years ago. I'm very old. We had a few kind of okay stats programs, and one of the better ones was called Urchin, which Google bought in 2005. That's why GA tags start with UA dash. It's Urchin Analytics. That's a fun fact you can impress your neighbors with. And then that's why UTM codes start with U, because of Urchin. Urchin was then rebranded as Google Analytics and made free for everyone. And that's where analytics really got going in terms of the GA that we use. So if we jump ahead to 2012, that's when Google introduced Universal, which is the GA most of you are using today. The big deal about Universal, and you might, depending on when you started the field, you might remember some of this transition, was Universal introduced the fact that you could track users across multiple devices and browsers, which at the time was just like, whoa, I cannot believe I can do that. And now with privacy and things, we can't do it as much anymore. But at the time, it was obviously kind of mind-blowing that we could track someone if they were on multiple devices. That was pretty cool. And this is when we get to the user interface that you probably know pretty well. And now we have GA4. Now, this used to be called App plus Web because that's the idea behind it. Everything is basically an app now. Websites are an app, apps are apps. And by having this data in a single place, you can make better decisions. Plus, there's a lot of really neat things about GA4, which of course I'm going to get into during the talk. But one thing I do want to point out, did you know you could use emojis in GA4 property names? As you can see, the kick point one is starting with a pizza, because Laura and our team loves pizza, and I was just like, just put a pizza in there. So you can do this. And I find it really helpful, especially those of you agency side. If you use emojis in property names, it makes it so much easier to find your client stuff when you're hunting through like 100 different analytics properties. So pro tip for you. So one of the things with GA4 is the user interface is obviously really different. You saw that in the previous slide. You know, there's a menu on the left and there's stuff on the right, but other than that, like the options are totally different. So fundamentally though, GA4 measures things in a really different way than Universal does. So I think one of the things I want to get into is really just what does that mean? Clicking, there we go. All right. So let's talk about a bit of how universal tracking works now, because I think there's a lot of confusion with people about like, what does GA measure and not measure, and how does that work? So you have your GA code on the site, and it collects some basic information like what pages people are on, how they got there, you know, basically how people use the site. You can also use something called the measurement protocol to put events in GA that didn't happen on your website. And that's how spam, for example, like when you have, you know, big traffic.club showing up in your reports, they use the measurement protocol to spam you. And so that's another way you can get data into GA. But Universal is obsessed with sessions. Everything is a session and everything has to be part of a session. So there's two things about sessions Universal that a lot of people don't know. First off, a session is 30 minutes long by default, which means that if you open a page and then you walk away and have lunch and you come back in an hour, then that means that you're a second session. So you'll have two sessions over the course of that hour, one at the beginning of the hour when you first open the page, and then your second session when you came back after lunch and actually used the site again. And the other issue that I see is that your time zone change. Sorry, I had to move something on my screen because the video threw me off. The second issue is that sessions reset at midnight for whatever time zone your account is set in. So let's say your account is set in Central Time. So when it's midnight for you, anyone who's on the site, their session resets. So midnight Central Time is the start of the workday in Moscow. It's lunchtime in Singapore. It's the end of the day in New Zealand. So if you're working with an international business and you see a lot of weird sessions or like extra sessions and you can't quite tell what happened in those countries, that's probably why. And there's some ways to deal with it. If you are in that situation, you want some tips, message me. LinkedIn is probably best. And I can send you some resources on how to get around that. But I think that's one of the things that people don't really know about Google Analytics is that it does reset every day. Now, there's still sessions in GA4. It doesn't remove the idea of sessions, but what it does do is it changes how they're calculated. So now there's an automatically collected session start event when you first come on the website, and the session duration is based on the time span between the first event and last event in the session. Sessions do still end after 30 minutes of inactivity, so keep that in mind, that's still there. But because it's measuring more events, you're likely to still be on the site. So for example, in Universal, let's say you opened up the site and then you looked at a page of content, big long page, 10 minutes to read. You could get to the end of that page, and because you never clicked anything, all you did was scroll down, Google Analytics Universal would have no idea that you were still there and your session might end. GA4 knows that you're there because it has automatically collected scroll events, and then it will actually record that you spent 10 minutes reading this page. That right there, fundamentally, is so much better than what we have in Universal. If you did nothing else, that would completely change your website analytics. GA4 also doesn't start a new session if someone who's mid-session comes to the site via a new campaign, which is how Universal works now. So if you're on the site, say you have lots of tabs open, because I'm sure lots of you have lots of tabs open because you're screwing up people's web analytics. And I have another rant about tabs, which I'm pretty sure I gave at MnSearch 2 years ago. But what I will say about tabs is, let's say you have a tab open and then you do an organic search because you're like, I can't find this page on this person's website. And you came via paid originally, and then you click a link to go back to the site while you're still in the site via organic, Universal will start a brand new session for you, now tagged as organic. That doesn't actually happen in GA4. So that part it felt weird that it did that. So I'm glad that's cleaned up. Now I want to talk about hit types. So every piece of data sent to Universal is called a hit, and that's where the original hits, where people used to call analytics way back when as hits, that's where that came from. Not all hits are created equal. There are different types of hits, indicating what type of data was being captured in Universal. And so you can see here, you've got page view, you have event, you have social, you have transactional hits and e-commerce hits, user timing hits, exception hits, and app or screen view hits. So that's all the different types of hits you could possibly have. Now in GA4, everything's an event, event, all the way down, all events, which means that it's more standardized and you don't need to worry about what type of hit you're capturing. And if the type of hit you're capturing is going to limit the kind of data you can collect. Everything is an event. So it doesn't matter what it is, it's an event. And you can set parameters and everything else associated with that event, which is incredibly freeing because it means that everything is way more standardized than it was before. Then on top of hit types universal, we have scopes. Scopes determine how you can report on data. And you might have heard this before when you're talking to an analyst, if you're not a GA nerd like I am, and they're like, oh, sorry, I can't give you that. It's session scoped and you're like, this is hit scoped or whatever it might be. What does that mean? So let's say, for example, you have a user scope, and this is associated with everything that user does. Session scope is everything in that session. Hit is that specific, precise piece of data. And then product was related to products, e-commerce. So one of the issues, for example, is people would always say, well, I want to see conversion rate based, but compare it to the number of page views that a page got. The issue is that page view is hit scoped and conversions are session scoped. So you couldn't actually mash the two of them together without doing something really gross in Google Data Studio where you would blend Google Analytics data with itself, which, I mean, it works, but it's dirty and you shouldn't have to do that, right? You should be able to just see how much this page contributed to a conversion. So that is gone now. That's just changed. And so another issue too that I found was a big problem Universal a lot was the fact that Universal, because conversions are session scoped, it didn't really, they should be user scoped. If you think about it, right? You go on a site 4 times, you convert on that 4th visit, you converted, I bought something. I am one person, happen to visit 4 times. Why isn't the conversion rate 100%? Doesn't matter how many times I visited before I bought the thing. Like, I bought the thing, congratulations. But in Google Analytics Universal, it would be recorded as a 25% conversion rate, which is ridiculous because people buy stuff, not sessions. So again, that's silly and it's going away. In GA4, instead of scopes, we have different types of properties and parameters. So you have user properties, which belong to a user, and then you have events and event parameters. And the idea of session scope, just like gone, bye-bye, very excited about that. Everything is an event parameter or user property, that's it, very clean. Now, something else that's changed a lot is my least favorite metric. And if you have attended a talk of mine in the past, you may have heard me talk about bounce rate. Here's a visual representation of how I feel about bounce rate. Bounce rate is a really horrible metric for so many reasons. It isn't accurate. It rarely helps people make good decisions. It's just like hot trash, as illustrated here. And the reason why bounce rate is bad is because it doesn't really capture what's truly going on the website unless you have a really in-depth analytics setup and you're capturing a complex set of user engagement metrics. So bounce rate is gone in GA4. There is no more bounce rate. This is very exciting. I am not in person. I can't quite express my excitement to you about bounce rate being gone. But I mean, people are going to come up with a brand new bounce rate, right? So now they have something called engaged sessions. So what is an engaged session? And I do worry a little bit that this is going to become the brand new bounce rate, but at least it'll be slightly more accurate than the current trash fire that we have that is bounce rate. Engaged session means that you had the website open in the foreground for 10 seconds, which doesn't sound like a lot of time, but I mean, think about your own use of websites. 10 seconds is actually probably a lifetime. You completed a conversion event, great. Or you viewed 2 or more pages or screens. Okay, these things count as engaged. I'm happy with that. Like, I can get behind this. I still think it's going to end up being the new bounce rate, but at least it will be slightly less crappy than what we have as bounce rate currently. Events, and I've talked about events a little bit, they're also really, really different. So I've talked about how GA4 is event-based in terms of its measurement, where in universal events are just like one feature of the greater whole. In universal events have a category, action, and label, right? And in GA4, instead, you have an event name, and then you have up to 25 parameters that can be collected with each event. And there's some automatically collected events as well. In Universal, the only thing that was automatically collected was page views. So when you installed the Universal code in your site, you just get page views and like where they came from and stuff like that, basic stuff. In GA4, you get a lot more information just out of the box without having to do anything fancy. So what's automatically collected when you add GA4 tracking to your website, you can turn on automatic event collection, which is turned on by default. And I do recommend turning it on. And it means that GA4 is going to listen for page views, 90% scroll depth, outbound clicks, site searches, and it works like site searches. If you have like WordPress, for example, it just automatically collects. And I've turned it on for clients and I've been a little skeptical it's really going to work, but it does actually work. Video engagement, assuming it's YouTube, of course, and file downloads. So you can find a list of all the things that GA4 will automatically collect. Oh, and by the way, I did email a PDF of my slides to the MnSearch team. So they have that and they can probably distribute it to you all. So don't feel like you have to write down these URLs or take screenshots. So if GA4 can't figure out some of these, you might not see them, but a lot of these are definitely going to work right out of the box. What is not automatically collected are other scroll depths. So anything other than 90%. Form fills, unfortunately, aren't collected outside out of the box, which I kind of get, but it sucks because the thing we have to set up for people, because it is really hard, I think, for a lot of non-technical people to get this sort of stuff captured. It's not capturing tell or mail to link clicks, which we always measure. It's not capturing non-YouTube videos. So if you have Wistia, for example, and it's not capturing other user engagement events that you might want to capture. So that kind of stuff, you're going to need to set up some custom code in Google Tag Manager to make that happen. And you can find a list of recommended events here. So these are the things that that GA4 recommends you set up. And this is how they want you to name them as well, because then it'll fit with the other stuff that they have going on. And there's an explanation on this page as to why they want you to use this naming scheme, but just stick with their naming scheme. And of course, you can capture events that aren't listed here at all, but this is the stuff that they recommend that you capture. So this is an example of what this event list actually looks like in GA4 for a client of ours. All I did was turn on basic collection. I didn't do anything else. I just wanted to see what's going to happen. They have a WordPress website. They have YouTube videos. So you can see they've got file downloads because they got lots of PDFs. And I love how everything just happens to be green in this. They're just having a busy month, like we're not magic workers. It's a busy time for them. You can see the video progress, which is awesome. You can see the search results, like all of this, it just happened. I didn't have to do anything, which is super cool. And I think already out of the box, if you don't do a lot of work with Google Analytics, just getting GA4 code on the site is going to make such a huge difference in your ability to capture all these extra events. Additionally, events also have a lot more privacy built in. So you can mark any event as NPA, which stands for no personalized ads, and that means you can't use that event for remarketing. So if you work in, say, healthcare or anything that's really, privacy focused, and you're capturing an event that you're worried that, like, I don't want to remarket to someone based on this kind of event, then you can just mark that as NPA. And then once you've marked it as that, no matter what your ads team does, they can't unmark that. They can't use it for remarketing. So it's a nice way to just clean that, just like turn that off, and then you don't have to worry about people accidentally remarketing to people based on something that you're not supposed to be doing. So what I want to make sure that you don't do, though, is make up your own events. So for example, don't call scroll depth how far down or something like that. Just piggyback on top of what GA4 is already using, or use the recommended events. And I'm going to show you how to do that as well. You can also edit events in GA4, because I'm sure we've all been in a situation where we have made an event and we put in a typo or we named it the wrong thing, and you can edit the event in GA4 and the data will show up in GA4, which I know, like, this should not be exciting, but it's those stupid things that you can't do sometimes. Like, please fix it so I can edit this. You can edit events. It's amazing. This is 2021 technology right at our fingertips. So this is what the event modification screen looks like, and it will go back in time as well, also magic. So you type in what the modification name is, you put in the matching conditions, you put in the parameters, and then poof, magic. It's great. So you can use this if you change your mind what you want to name an event, you want to name it something else, you can do that. If somebody put in a typo, if somebody accidentally used a capital letter, event should always be lowercase. I have some parameters on that later. So that kind of stuff, you can always clean that up in here. You can also create events based on events, which I don't know if you remember that old meme about yo dog, I put a thing in your thing so you can thing while you thing. It's like, this is how it is for events. So this does seem kind of esoteric, but it's actually really practical. So let's say, for example, you wanted to create an event when somebody scrolled 90% of the way down your blog post and signed up for your newsletter. You could do that, for example. So this is an example of what I've called a scroll conversion. And I want to fire a special event if somebody scrolls 90% of the way down the page, but not for any other scroll depth. So I don't want it firing at 50% or 75%. I just want 90%. And then if I wanted to change the name of this later on, I could. I just edit it and then I change the custom event name. And you can even mark it as a conversion. Not that I would mark 90% scroll as a conversion. That doesn't make you money. It's not a conversion. But these are the kinds of events that you could mark as a conversion. There's lots of opportunities here. And I think as we start to get into GA4 land, I think people are going to come up with some really interesting options on what you can do in terms of creating events based on events. And definitely, I'm thinking of some stuff. We'll be publishing some blog posts about that too. You can also create events based on several conditions, either at the same time, different time, etc. And this part is really neat. And it's related to how you create audiences. So I'm just going to take a brief detour into audiences. And those of you who are more search focused and less paid focused, you might not have used the audiences feature all that much in GA. That might have looked like something that was for the paid team. Well, audiences now for you, search people, because you can create audiences based on really anything and then see how big that audience is. So the example I have here, you can create an audience, and I'm creating an audience of people who on their first visit, so session number is 1, scrolled at least 50% or more of the way down the page on any page at all. I could have limited this to specific pages or whatever. This is just a broad example. So you can see percent scrolled is at 49 and up, greater than 49, because I want 50% or more. And then I can say, for example, within 5 minutes. So I want someone who gets on the website and then within 5 minutes scrolls more than 50% of the way down the page. Maybe you want to have an audience of people who've added to the cart within 5 minutes. Maybe you want to say somebody who added to the cart within 7 days. Maybe you want to target people who sign up for the newsletter right away, for example. Like, there's lots of opportunities here. And I recommend clicking on absolutely everything. I always recommend this anyway. Just click on things. You really can't break it. And try out different combinations to figure out what these audiences will work for you. So here's some of the parts of audience creation that I think are the most exciting. So first off is step scoping. That's the first one on the left here. And that's how you decide how you're going to build the audience. So you can say you want it to happen across all sessions, within the same session, or within the same event. So this is how particular you want to be with it. Time constraint. So I mentioned this as well. You could say within 5 minutes or 5 hours or 5 days. How quickly do you want this person to do this thing after they come to the website? So this can also help you limit, say, in the same session or across all sessions. So maybe it's like 2 sessions over 5 days, but you want to make sure that they did this thing within the first 5 days, and then you put them in an audience. And then the third option is for the steps, if it's indirectly followed by or directly followed by. And so that can be how you build, for example, audiences based on funnel steps. And maybe they can do that at whatever point in their visit, or if you want them to do things in a specific order, you could build audiences for both and compare the size of the audiences, for example, if you want. So this little bit here's the fun part. So once you have your audience set, then you click that audience trigger option, and then you create an event when a user becomes a member of this audience. Now, this is fun because then you can use that event as a conversion, or you could slot them into yet another audience. And if this person falls out of the audience because of the membership duration, which by default is set to 30 days, then you could fire another event when they come back into the audience again. So let's say, for example, you said, I only want people who've booked, oil changes within a certain period of time. And then I know that I need people to come back every, 90 days for an oil change or whatever it might be. So then I want to do extra remarketing to people who fired the oil change event, twice in the past 365 days. And I'm going to show them something different, or I'm going to remarket to them in a different way. And so those are the kinds of things that you can do with audiences. Now, you don't want to go crazy with events. You do have a limit to the number of events you can do, but there are lots of possibilities here in terms of creating audiences and then building events on those audiences and then making conversions based on those events that you created based on audiences. It's a lot, but hopefully you're all following along. So goals are now based entirely in events. No more destination goals. So if you're using thank you pages to record goals in Google Analytics, you shouldn't have done that anyway. Now you can't definitely do it. And here's why you shouldn't use destination goals anyway. I'm going to tell you why. Because the issue is that people like to leave these tabs open, because what's classic marketing theory? Leave something useful on the thank you page. They do the thing, except then they leave the tab open, and then everybody leaves all their tabs open all the time. They never close their tabs. So every time their browser would wake back up again, it would fire a conversion event. Super annoying. This also happens for e-commerce transactions. If people leave that receipt page open, every time their browser reactivates, it would send another transaction event off to Universal. I'm not 100% sure that GA4 has fixed this. There are ways to solve for this problem, though, particularly for transactions. And you can tell if you have this problem or not by making a custom report of all the transactions and then seeing how many unique transaction IDs you have. And if you have more than one sale, like more than one transaction with the same transaction ID, then you have this problem. We were working with the symphony orchestra, and I mean, the symphony orchestra audience is usually older people. They would leave the tabs open forever. And what happened is they would look at their software, their box office software, and they would look at Google Analytics, and the two of them, and I don't expect them to match, but I expect them to be somewhat close. They weren't even in the same ballpark. And this was the problem, was because people were leaving these tabs open forever. And so Google Analytics made the site look like amazing, and the box office was the reality. So just something to keep in mind is that leaving tabs open is a real problem with destination goals, which is why I'm really excited that goals are now based entirely on events. So how do I make a goal? It's so easy. You just click this slider to mark an event as a conversion. That's it. Like, it's so simple. Just sit with that for a second compared to the stupid stuff we had to go through in Google Analytics Universal in order to make these goals happen. Now you just click the slider, which is both awesome and also incredibly dangerous, because you just know that somebody's going to go in here and click like first visit as a conversion. Please don't do that. Someone will try it though. And this is something I always talk about. Make sure that only the stuff that is your actual goals should be a goal or relates to your actual goals in some way. So don't set page view as a goal. I mean, someone will. Please don't. And I think this is where you actually want to go back to your real business goals and decide what things are actually conversions. And I've also talked about the theory of how to build these goal strategies quite a bit. There's a blog post on our website about building goal charters. I recommend checking that out, because that'll really help you figure out how to turn these business goals into the actual metrics that you measure. And then that'll also help you figure out what should be conversions on your website. Conversions are also more flexible than they used to be. You can turn on and off conversions, which before you had 20, and then once they were used up, that was it. You can delete them, you can only rename them. Super frustrating, really annoying. but you can archive conversions now or shut them off. Now, that's not going to change data in the past. If it was a conversion, it'll still be a conversion, but at least you can shut it off and open up that room for other conversions to come in, which is pretty great. So at this point, you're probably like, yes, Dana, I would like GA4. How do I make this happen? So what you can do is you can click that upgrade button in your universal property. But what I have been doing is creating a new separate GA4 property just by clicking the create property button and going through the steps. And then I do what's called double tagging. And that is where I run tags for both Universal and GA4 in our Google Tag Manager container. So hopefully you're already using Google Tag Manager. And if you aren't, you basically are going to have to now, unfortunately. GA4, you can run it without Google Tag Manager. It's not recommended. And I feel like this is just Google's just, you're going to have to use GTM, unfortunately. So again, if you're not using GTM, you want some resources on that, get in touch. I can definitely put you in the right direction on using Google Tag Manager. And GTM is great. Once you start using it, you'll love it. I promise. A few years ago, I think it was about 4 years ago, I sat down at my desk and I was like, okay, it's time. I really need to learn Google Tag Manager. And I did. So you can learn it too, I promise. Now, once you've created the property, what you're going to get is called a data stream for web. So that's the ID you put into Google Tag Manager, not the property ID from the property settings. So that's different from Universal. Instead, you want to put the data stream ID in there. You can also have more than one web stream going into the same property, which means, for example, you could have a roll-up GA4 for multiple domains, as well as separate GA4s for each of the domains. So that would be really neat if you work with a company that has lots of websites. You could toss them all, have a version of GA4 that's all of them tossed in together using different data streams, and then a version of GA4 for each individual website. And you'll want to make sure that this enhanced measurement slider is turned on, or you can shut off parts of it if you want, or some of it, not the whole thing. But I don't recommend that. Just leave the whole thing on. It is quite useful. And then what you do is you go into Google Tag Manager, you click Add Trigger, you select the GA4 configuration trigger, you paste in your measurement ID, and then that's it. Ta-da! And then you should see events coming into GA4 right away in the real-time view. This is extremely simple. It doesn't require a lot of fancy configuration. It's even easier than setting up Universal Analytics was in Google Tag Manager. You just need one tag to do it. No variables, no triggers, nothing else. You just need to add this tag. So extremely simple. So now you might be wondering, okay, so the basic events are fine, but how do I add my own events to GA4? The basic events are fine, but you can do better. So if you've already been using Google Tag Manager, and if you're not, you're going to be, I promise. So you might already have triggers set up for important events because you're already using, hopefully, Google Tag Manager for your existing Universal property, and you can just reuse those. So this is an example of the trigger that we have on our website at the bottom of the pages. If you scroll all the way down, there's a little rocket ship, and if you click it, it vibrates and it shoots you back up to the top. It's extremely cute. And we want to record how many people actually use that thing. And so we have a trigger when people click on the rocket ship that then it can make a tag happen. Unfortunately, I don't have time to get into how we actually set this trigger up. Again, if you do want some pointers on Google Tag Manager, message me and I can send you in the right direction. But what you should have in theory is if you already have your stuff set up in Google Tag Manager, you should already have these triggers built in, and then you just make new tags using the existing triggers. So you can see here for this rocket ship click, we have an event name of UI click because click is reserved for external links, which does irritate me. I don't really like that they're using click. I'd rather they picked external click for that, but that's fine. Thanks, Google. So I made a new event name called UI click. And then for the parameter is element, and then the value is rocket ship. So you could use this for anything. You could say UI click of an accordion, for example, or whatever it might be. Anything that's a UI element, you could reuse this. So but the thing is now that I've registered this, I have this element of rocket ship, you might want to see that in your default reports right away, but that's not actually the case. You have to register it in order for it to be shown in default reports. So this is what this looks like if I go into my GA4 and I look at the UI click event. So I've just clicked on the UI click event in GA4 to view this, and I'm taken to the report that looks like this. But you'll see on the right that events in the last 30 minutes, that parameter value, totally blank, no drop down, like I can't do anything with it. I can see that the event happened, but I can't see what thing they clicked. So what you have to do is create a custom dimension, which sounds weird because, in Universal, custom dimensions were things like capturing groups of information, and now custom dimensions are used to register event parameters, which is a little bit weird, but you'll get used to it. So what you do is you go in and you say, create a new custom dimension, and it's right there. It's quite clear where to use it in the UI. And then you just say the dimension name is UI element and the event parameters element. That's it. It's quite simple. You're just saying, like, pay attention to this element that I've set up. That's all. And with custom dimensions as well, you can't map more than one event parameter to more than one custom dimension, but you can archive custom dimensions, which again, could not do that in analytics, which frees up that event parameter to be used to a new custom dimension. So if you screwed up and you assigned your event parameter to the wrong custom dimension, which I have totally done already, and GA4 has been out for like a hot minute, then you can archive that, and then it will free up that event parameter again to be assigned to something else. Now that I've done this, you can see on the right, now that element is showing up. The GA documentation says it'll take 24 hours for this to work. It takes about 5 minutes. Unless you have a huge amount of visitors coming in, it can take a little bit longer, but for smaller sites, really no time at all. And now you can start to see some information come in for the different parameters. In this case, we only have rocket ship registered, but if I had lots of different elements for UI clicks, you would set up a cohort analysis for that. And this is what it looks like. The far left column are all the things that are available to you to set up. The next column, it's not quite middle, it's like leftish column, are the settings for the specific tab that you're looking at, because you can have more than one tab in a single analysis. And then the rest is the report itself. So you can see here I have segments for mobile and tablet set up, but weirdly by default, there's no segment for desktop. Like we still use desktop computers. I am on one right now, Google. I don't know why. They don't think that people use desktop computers, but here we are. So you can create a new segment by clicking that plus symbol next to segments on that far left-hand side. And then this is what it looks like. So you can click on the suggested segments templates, and then you see there's one for technology. And then you just type in device category exactly matches desktop. It was so easy to make. Why doesn't GA4 come with this? I don't know. So you click save and apply, and now you can add it to your analysis. And this is what you get. This is for a client of ours. Our data is very boring. Only people come to us via desktop and a few confused mobile users. I mean, even for them, it's not like the most thrilling in the world, but you do get to see at least this kind of data. And you can see the overlap of how people use the site, i.e. no one is coming to the site just on a tablet is really my big takeaway from this. So something I love about the analysis, again, nerd, is the path analysis. So path analysis in Universal, you may have tried to use it. You may have realized it really sucks. The path analysis in GA4 is so much better. And so you can see here, this is for the Kickpoint website. And I'm just looking at page title end screen, and then you can click on one and it opens it up, and you click on one and it opens it up. And then you can go down as far the rabbit hole as you want and see that eventually people get to, let's see, this one starts with how to take a decent headshot using your phone, which is weirdly our top post on our website. We don't get any business from it. It's just really popular. And then you can see people then go to the homepage, and then some people go back to the headshot post, which, you know, is the thing about path analysis, right? Is it's like, I'm going to unlock some insights. And I think the insights a lot of time are like people are confused or they don't know how to use websites, unfortunately. You get something out of it, right? But one thing that's really cool about the path analysis is that you can do analysis based on the last thing that people went to. So to do this, you open up a path analysis, and then at the top right, there's a button called Start Over, which again, not very intuitive. I'm sure it'll be fixed later. You click that, and then you get an option to set the endpoint. So for example, if I said, show me how people get to our contact page, then you can see everything going back the other way now. And you can see that people go from our homepage to our contact page, or from our process page to our contact page, which is perfect. That's exactly what we want to have happen. So if you did this, for example, for your cart page or for a specific product page, I imagine you'd find out some really interesting things about how people engage with your website. And this is something 100% you could not do in Universal before. So I recommend trying all the visualization types. The funnel report is also very cool, but there's no way I could show you that without showing private client information. I tried. It was going to be like red boxes everywhere. So unfortunately, you're going to have to try that out on your own. I'm sorry. But honestly, the best way to learn is by testing. Make a fun property for yourself. Fun, like this isn't our jobs. I have so many test properties floating around for us, for clients, for myself. The only way you get in there is by trying stuff. And remember, in Tag Manager, you can have more than one Google Analytics property loading up. It doesn't really have a performance hit. Just put it in there and give it a shot. And of course, always create a new property if you're going to be playing around. You don't want to mess up your actual production data. I have a lot of other properties, I call them sandboxes, that are just intended to be used and played with. And then you put that away and then things go into production after that. So I have a list of further reading. Again, MnSearch, they have the PDF of these. So there's some links in there to get you started, and 2 training courses that are excellent by Krista Seaton and Charles Farina. Really fantastic stuff. And I promise that my course will be coming out later this summer. And thank you very much.
Wow, that was amazing.
Thank you. I will stop screen sharing now.
There's so much engagement. We have a lot of questions from.
Yes,
Ton.
I see that there are many chats now that I've stopped sharing my screen.
All the chats. Yes. This was
Okay.
so awesome, Dana.
Hit
First
me.
of all, thank you. Yeah, let's start from the top. So we've got Eric Carlson. How does the new event tracking work with Tag Manager? Does tracking events as goals still need to be managed in both Tag Manager and GA?
So you create the events in Tag Manager and the events show up in GA, basically, is how that works. So I would start by just putting in the GA4 property and letting the automatic stuff do its thing. And then you can see what else you have to add on later on once you've done that. So I recommend for everybody, just start double tagging right away. And if you end up like screwing up that GA4 property, like what you can do is you can also make 2 GA4 properties, like you can make as many as you want, but make 2, and one of them label it sandbox. And then that one can be the one that you do weird stuff to. And the other one, just label it production, and then don't do anything to that one except for the basic built-in enhanced measurement. And then you can add things to it later after you've tested it in the sandbox, and you know it's working the way that it should be.
Awesome. Thank you. MSR asks, I'm down with tracking YouTube video plays. What about audio player engagement? We do a weekly podcast and embed a speaker audio player with the blog coverage of the topic. Tips for tracking that.
Is it? It's not YouTube from the sound of it, though. I would look at what the player is. It really depends. A lot of times I end up having to, I don't write JavaScript. I have a program I work with to write JavaScript. I end up having a programmer write JavaScript, or someone else may already have written JavaScript for you that you would then execute that would send events that are listenable up to Tag Manager so it could hook into those events. So for example, for Wistia, they don't have a GA4 integration right now, but I do have some JavaScript that listens for Wistia plays. And so I use that to send events to GA4 right now until Wistia gets a GA4 integration.
Perfect. Brian asks, are there limits on how many conversions you can have?
There is 50, 30, somewhere between those 2 numbers is the correct number. But again, like if you have that many conversions, I'm very skeptical.
What about streams? Is there a limit to streams?
I don't know if there's a limit to streams, actually. No one's talked about it. I'm sure there is. Let me know what you find out. But yeah, there might be.
Dean asks, how many goals are available? Oh wait, we just answered that one.
Yep.
Okay, here we go. I just was like blindly reading. MSR, nope, that one was answered. Anonymous attendee, does anything change when using campaign URL builder?
It does pick up UTMs, so you can continue to use the same UTM codes that you always have been. So don't think about changing anything there. But if you have been sending events to GA using the HIP builder, aka measurement protocol, there is a HIP builder in alpha for GA4, which definitely try that. So for example, and what I talk about when I say using the measurement protocol to send hits, here's an example of like, if you have a server-side event. So for example, one of our clients is a SaaS company like online software. And when you sign up for a trial of their software, we know that you did it in the web browser because it's a client event in the web client. So we can send it off to GA because we know that triggered. But then when your trial vests, which happens at 30 days from whenever you signed up, and you might not actually trigger that, it might just happen in the back end, then we want to send that off to GA as well. And so we use the measurement protocol from a server-side event to send that off to GA, and then we can tie it all together and figure out how much money they made and blah, blah, blah. It's great. But that's one of the downsides of GA is you can just fire off stuff into there. the new measurement protocol actually has API secrets. So you can hopefully limit people from spamming your GA4 properties, I hope.
Perfect. Thank you. And we got questions popping off in here. And yes, so we are ending at 7:30, so we'll try and get to all of these, but can we get Dana's contact info in the chat again for any questions that we don't get to?
Yes, message me on LinkedIn, and I think I closed that tab because I'm so responsible about closing my tabs all the time, but I will grab my LinkedIn URL.
We've got it in there.
Oh,
you are
great,
all good,
you got
Dana.
it. Okay, thank you. Yeah, just message me there. I do check LinkedIn every day.
Perfect. Dean asks, I want to do a deep dive into GA4 and learn all the things. Is there a resource you recommend to start learning besides LinkedIn Learning?
Yeah, that was great that we you shared Krista Seidens and somebody else's
Charles
as well.
Farina's, yeah.
Charles Farina's,
yeah. Either of those courses are excellent. They're both experts. Go for it. Yeah. One's on CXL, the other is private.
Okay, perfect. Sounds good.
Oh, and I just want to get to this question from Eric that you just posted in. Is there anything different, better for classifying channel source? Well, Eric, do I have this for you? Actually, I should have mentioned this. There's no more channels. It's just sources and mediums. So you don't actually have to worry about other anymore or people mistagging stuff. It's just source medium, which I actually think long-term is probably going to be really confusing for clients because they're used to seeing everything slotted into neat little channels. So I think what I'm going to end up doing is a lot of reporting in Google Data Studio and then recreating channels essentially using case statements, which I did talk about in a Moz Whiteboard Friday, which if you Google my name and Moz Whiteboard Friday in Google Data Studio, it should come up. And I included a case statement there on how to recategorize bad traffic. And that's what I'll do for that.
Perfect. Another one from MSR. Does GA4 change how we've been using UTM tags?
Nope. Keep doing it. Just make sure it's all lowercase, please. And that's just life advice.
Awesome. Derek asks, is there anything of note worth considering when transferring a GA property from Universal to GA4?
I mean, definitely the stuff that I talked about. I think the biggest challenge for a lot of people, and this is why I'm making this course for LinkedIn Learning, is about events, because you're going to have to completely rethink how you capture events because there isn't that category action label hierarchy anymore. So there's not a lot of good answers out there yet. I feel like all of us working in GA4 are just we don't know how to do this. So look at the recommended events and just try to figure it out. And then if you come up with something cool, please publish it. The community is pretty open about GA4 and there's a Slack measure. If you Google measure Slack, it should take you there and there's a really active GA channel. Lots of people sharing tips and tricks there too.
All right, awesome. Barrett asks, we've set a couple of GA4 properties up for our clients, but our data from Google Ads is not being pulled in accurately through the account link. Have you seen this before or have any ideas to troubleshoot?
I haven't. We're not doing a lot of ad analysis in GA4 yet. I would actually take this to the measure Slack. People are pretty they've seen it all in that channel. So if you're having trouble troubleshooting, or you could talk to your ads reps because you're spending money with Google, the ads reps will sometimes answer questions about Google Analytics, which is nice.
Super helpful. And while we're on the topic of Google Ads, we have a question from Michael. Does GA4 integrate closer to Google Ads metrics than Universal did?
I think it's about the same level of integration. I wouldn't expect anything new or exciting, unfortunately. But the audience building is so much better that I think you're going to end up with better remarketing campaigns as a result.
We have an anonymous attendee. We can no longer track internal traffic in Google Analytics using service provider and network domain. Is this possible in GA4?
No. There is a way to track internal traffic, but there's so much better way to do it. Simo Ahava, who's basically the grand wizard of Google Tag Manager, he published a great post on putting parameters in URLs to track internal traffic. And so now I make clients put a parameter of internal equals true at the end of URLs. And because I have it as a user scope dimension or a user property in GA4, it just goes along with them unless they clear their cookies. And so that way I can just always segment them out. Thank you, Dean. I appreciate that you say that's brilliant. But yeah, Simo Ahava, and hopefully we can dig up that link as well and share it with everybody. It is a nerdy explanation of how to set it up because that's how Simo rolls. But if you know Tag Manager, it's pretty easy to set up.
We have a question from Rachel. Tips for transitioning a client away from a thank you page conversion tracking strategy.
Just tell them it's not going to work. That's part of it. It's, you know what, you can still show a thank you page, right? And that's the thing, is like, show the thank you page all day. Just don't use that as the conversion. So have the form successful submit as the trigger for the conversion, for the event that would become the conversion. But keep the thank you page. There's no reason not to keep that if it's something that's valuable.
Awesome. Dean asks, how susceptible is GA4 to sampling versus universal?
It doesn't seem to be, actually. It seems to be a lot better with regards to sampling. We've seen situations where we have way more data. We have one client who's like just over that 10 million limit on a monthly basis. They're like 9999, and we let it just run wild with GA4, and it seemed to be fine. So I think you'll be okay.
Brandon asks, I really like GA4, but I feel like I'm tracking the same events between the two. What is the number one aha addition you are using that wasn't available in UA?
Oh, making events based on events, for sure. Like, and events based on audiences. So here's a case study. We have one of our clients who's a convention center, obviously not very busy right now, but they will be. And we have very distinct audiences for them, like wedding planners, meeting planners, convention planners. And so before we were using Segments Universal to track those, but now we're going to slot them into audiences and then fire events. And then we can figure out conversions, like if person filled out form and they belong to audience wedding planners, so they fire that event and they filled out the form, then we can do like different segmentation or reporting differently on that versus other stuff. So it's just more powerful.
All right. And we have time for just a few more questions. Michelle Peterson, when will your course on this be live?
So I literally just got approval today from LinkedIn that it's happening. We are recording in July. So August, I don't know, when I did the tech SEO, I think it took a month after recording for them to polish it all up. So fingers crossed. I will promote the heck out of it. So don't worry, you'll hear about it.
Make sure you send us a link and we'll get it to the MnSearch audience.
Oh yes, you'll be quite sick of me by the time it's been out for a week. So don't worry about it.
I highly doubt that. It seems from all the questions we've got, people just want more.
Yeah.
All right. Michael asks, do you recommend converting GA3 to GA4? Will GA3 data match up with GA4 data?
It will not match up because the way they tie together users is a little bit different. And they do some extrapolation apparently. So, and the session tying together is a little bit better as well in GA4. So the numbers will never match up. When you double tag, you'll see that right away. And your data from GA3/Universal will not carry over to GA4, which is why it's important to just set up that GA4 property now and just start getting data in there.
Awesome. And this is our last question in the chat, which is about all we have time for. So that is perfect. Molly asks, I'm GA certified Universal, but will that program change to GA4? If so, do you know when?
I'm positive it will. I don't know when. That is actually a good question for probably the Measure Slack. If you're not in there, you should be for sure. But again, like I'm sure lots of people will talk about it when it's out there. Follow Krista and Charles, the people whose courses I mentioned, because they are one of my major sources on all new things GA, and they're both on the panel of experts advising the GA4 team.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you so much for answering the many questions that came your way. And yes, thank you so much for joining us, Dana. This was so awesome. Yeah, if you want to throw your thanks in the chat, everyone, what you learned. I'm sure you're going to be getting a lot of messages and LinkedIn requests. But before we sign off, is there anything that you wanted to promote while you have the attention of everyone?
I probably should. So I have a course on LinkedIn Learning on technical SEO that came out a month ago now. And it's intended for people who technical SEO isn't your full-time job, but you kind of have to do a little bit of it because you're a generalist SEO or you're just getting into technical SEO. It's just over an hour long. I have a very soothing voice in it. So checking it out. If you're a LinkedIn Pro member, it's free. Otherwise, there's a small fee to buy it, but actually LinkedIn Pro is pretty great. And the whole LinkedIn library of courses, like I get that I'm an instructor there and I'm obligated to say it's great, but they're a really good team and they really do a great job of making these courses. So I do recommend checking it out. And it is one of my pinned pieces on my profile if you go to my profile on LinkedIn.
All right, well, perfect. I believe a lot of people will definitely be checking that out. Very exciting. And seriously, thank you so much, Dana. This was so awesome. Lovely to have you back at MnSearch, and we'll hopefully see you again very soon.
Yes, I cannot wait to actually travel back to America again.
Yes, we miss you.
Thank you so much for having me.